How do you do? I'm Dustaroo. A concept dork as I am, I came across Scott Junn's video, Can Survivors Be More Than Skins? This video right here. It's a concept I've heard over the years in some form or another and always dismissed due to how hard it would be to implement into the game balance-wise. If a particular character were to have a really strong passive, I know the DBD meta hogs wouldn't resist almost exclusively maining that one character. And with the Prestige 100 system we currently have in the game, making the choice of tossing all of your time and points into one specific character has never been such an easy choice. But that only really matters if the passives are good or impactful. If all the passives were basically a non-issue or actually had no impact on gameplay during the match, then this is just a feature that adds really nothing to the game except for the possibility of more bugs or exploits down the line. At that point, why even add it? This is not a unique take, as Scott himself basically says these exact same points in his video. But I can't help thinking about, what if? Especially after being so consumed by Texas Chainsaw since the technical test came out, I really love the idea of survivors having a lot more character outside of how they look or what $15 skin they have equipped. Scott gave the example of unique passives for each character, giving them a slight edge in some aspect of Dead by Daylight's gameplay loop that either reflects their character or the perks they introduce to the game. He gave the example of Meg recovering from exhaustion 5% quicker, meaning you get your exhaustion perk back 2 seconds faster. While not very impactful, as 2 seconds would almost never actually come into play, there could be some rare situations where those 2 seconds are the difference between you going down or extending a chase an extra 30 seconds. What would unique survivor passives look like, and could they be implemented in this game that's coming scarily close to being almost a decade old? Yeah, it's almost time for us to check into the retirement village. So I did the unhealthy thing I usually do, and I started writing them out. I was giddy and excited about the idea of a reason to actually buy those survivors I've been putting off. Shrine of Secrets actually used to be a good way of getting perks, so most of them I had their perks in the game pretty quickly. I didn't even need to purchase them. I can't say the same anymore. There's so many. So I made a complete list of every survivor's unique passive, and just to give a sneak peek on what I learned from this, unique survivor passives cause a bit more issues than I would have originally thought, and by the end, I think you'll see that too. Just let it be known, I tried to make these somewhat feasible in the game balance-wise, while having some impact not being a major impact. You don't want people exclusively picking this character because of their strong ability, but you don't want this to be irrelevant. Let's see what I came up with. We start with Dwight. Survivors in his 8-meter radius gain a 2% gen repair speed. We have Meg, who gets a 5% faster exhaustion recovery time. Claudette, 5% increased healing speed to all other survivors. Jake, sabotage hooks 5% faster, and this applies to the current sabotage total timer, meaning if you were to use a really strong sabo build, you're getting less of an effect if you were just using saboteur. Nia, fall stagger is reduced by 10%. I miss old balance landing, but I know it was broken, but I miss it so much. Bill, recovers from the dying state 5% faster. David, bleeds 25% less blood, meaning the time between blood puddles is extended 25% longer. Ace, has 5% base lock. Kate, the intensity of struggles while being carried by the killer are increased by 5%, meaning she wiggles a little harder than the average survivor. Adam, healing skill check progression is increased by an extra 1%. So when you do a great skill check on a generator, you get 1% total of that generator done extra instantly as like a small reward. I'm not sure if it's the same amount for healing skill checks, but basically you just get double the amount of progression per great skill checks, only on healing. Jeff, sabotage hooks stay sabotaged for 10% longer, which is 3 seconds. This one should probably be increased, but I didn't think of it, so we're moving on. Jane, killer stuns last 10% longer. Basically, most killer stuns across the board are around 3 seconds, so on average, this would basically just add 0.3 seconds to each stun. Not a lot, but can be just enough. Yui, blood disappears on the ground 25% faster. Blood stays for 10 seconds, meaning 2.5 seconds shaved off the visible blood on the ground. Blood disappears slightly faster. Not too bad. Zarina recovers from the broken status effect 5% faster. Cheryl, being healed while in the down state is increased by 5%. Felix, item consumption rate is 5% slower. Elodie, wiggles 5% faster in the killer's grasp. Wiggles on minimum are around 16 seconds if you hit all the great little skill checks, meaning only 0.8 seconds is shaved off the struggle time. Yu Jin, crouch movement speed is 10% faster. Jill, cleanse totems 5% faster. Totems take 14 seconds to cleanse, meaning 0.7 seconds is shaved off the total time. Leon, killer's basic hit cooldown is increased by 10%. For the most part, that's 2.7 seconds, meaning 0.27 seconds have been added to the total timer, only if Leon is hit though. I only made it 10% because 5% is kind of a bad number to visualize at 0.135 seconds. Michaela boons 5% faster, so 0.7 seconds less on dull totems and 1.4 seconds on hex totems. Jonah, 5% less chance of getting skill checks. Hattie, aura reading lasts 5% longer, meaning you can read a killer's aura or a survivor's aura for 5% longer than you normally should. Ada, 5% faster self-healing. Let's use self-care as an example. Self-care takes 45 seconds to perform a self-heal, so she would shave off 2.25 seconds off that heal time. Still wouldn't get me using self-care though. Rebecca heals survivors 5% faster. To be honest, I'm running out of ideas for passives, and healing just seems like the only fair thing to give her. Victorio, aura reading dissipates 5% faster, meaning you have your aura revealed by the killer for 5% less time. Felita, hastes last 5% longer. Sprint burst, for an example, would only add 0.15 seconds to the total amount of running time. Renato, scratch marks disappear 5% faster. So scratch marks would disappear 0.5 seconds, half a second faster than they normally would. Better than it sounds, as scratch marks lose intensity over time. Gabriel, you open chests 10% faster, 1 second off chests being opened. Nick Cage, sounds while injured on the ground are 10% more quiet. Yoichi, boon effects last 5% longer, meaning the amount of time a boon effect lasts once you leave its radius is 5% longer. Ashley Williams, 10% longer speed burst on protection hits. On hit sprints are about 1.8 seconds, so all it would add is 0.18 seconds. So OP. David Tap, move 5% faster on the ground. Quentin, opens the exit gates 10% faster. Gates go from 20 seconds to 18 seconds. Feng, 50% less regression on failed skill checks, turning 10% gen regression to 5%. Lori, slow action speed such as entering lockers, pallets, or vaults is 5% faster, meaning you can slow vault a window 5% faster. And finally, Ripley, 10% quieter footsteps sounds. This was just a quick jot down, so these definitely wouldn't be balanced. Some numbers would need to be adjusted if they were added, some lower, some higher. But this was the general idea that I came up with, the full expansion of what Scott proposed. After trying to come up with an individual passive-like power for each survivor, it really started to dawn on me how fast this well was drying up. Where to just actually think of specific abilities, I had to stretch my imagination on what could or what should be a passive effect for individual survivors. While some were fun and interesting and could help with some niche builds here and there, the potential for this to keep moving forward with new survivors basically coming in every 3 months, it can't go on for much longer, if it already hasn't crossed the tipping point with what I proposed. While a fun concept, the reality of having each survivor have some unique aspect to them is just not a sustainable feature. You could repeat powers here and there like what I did with Rebecca, but then it just kinda loses the appeal and the personality. It's not a very unique ability if it gets copy and pasted onto several other survivors in the game's lifespan. Then take into account all the balance issues that could come along down the line with the introduction of new perks or perhaps specific killer-based powers. It's a whole lot of work and potential issues for something that's not all that necessary and would eventually just stop being about building the character. If this system were to come into Dead by Daylight, I don't think it would be the worst thing. It would be at least a little bit of flavor, but I think it's too much of a headache after all is said and done. I don't think this is where the idea dies though. I've heard other suggestions that seem a lot more possible, and significantly easier to balance around. What if survivors had roles and classes? A group of survivors can fill a specific style of play rather than their character or perk flavor, altering what they can do in the trial. Once again, this is not a new concept or one I thought up myself. In fact, this is kind of just like how Evil Dead functions, but instead of like styles of weapons you would use or damage numbers, they have passive buffs around gameplay within the match. So let's say there are 6 roles survivors can fit into, and each one has 4 passive effects. We start off with goal-oriented. This would be survivors like Dwight, Jane, Jonah, and Hattie. They know what needs to be done and will excel in doing it quickly. There is a lot to do and not a lot of time. Survivors who are goal-oriented open chests 25% faster. They open exit gates 15% faster. Great skill checks offer a 2% progression bonus instead of 1. They also cleanse totems 10% faster. Then we have the supportive roles. This would be survivors like Claudette, Adam Francis, Rebecca Chambers, Michaela Reed. Nothing else matters when seeing others in pain. They put all their heart and mind into keeping their fellow survivors on their feet. Survivors who are supportive heal all other survivors 10% faster in all states. Great healing skill checks increase progression by an extra 5% instead of 1. They unhook survivors 10% faster. Other survivors healing you have an increased healing speed of 5%. Then we have the distraction role. These would be survivors like Meg, Yui, Kate, and Renato. These survivors excel in taking the killer's attention and wasting their time for their team's success. Distracting survivors would have 5% faster exhaustion recovery speed, would have their fall stagger reduced by 10%. All haste effects last 5% longer. Negative status effects would last for 10% less time. Then we have the specialized role. This would be survivors like Jake, Felix, Zarina, and Victorio. Survivors with well-refined skills able to use the tools provided in the realm more effectively than their fellow survivors. Survivors who are specialized, sabotage hooks 5% faster. Sabotage hooks last 10% longer sabotaged. Item consumption rate is 10% less. The sound made from actions is reduced by 10%. This includes cleansing totem sounds, gen repair sounds, and healing sounds. We have Lone Wolf. Survivors who would fall into this role would be Nia, Ada, Yujin, and Feng. These survivors prefer to keep their head down. Every moment out of the killer's line of sight is a small victory. These abilities would include being able to self-heal 10% faster, crouch movement speed would be 25% faster, scratch marks would disappear 10% faster, and blood pools would disappear from the trial 25% faster. Then we come to the final role, Meat Shield. Survivors who would fill this role would be David King, Bill Overbeck, Leon Kennedy, and Ashley Williams. These survivors don't mind bleeding a little bit if it means keeping others safe. Movement speed while downed is 20% faster. Recover from the dying state 15% faster. The struggle intensity while being carried by the killer is increased by 10%. Protection hits grant a 25% increase to on-hit haste effect. So after making both unique survivor passives and role-based passives, I definitely think a role-based passive system would be a much cleaner fit for the actual game. While the introduction of a passive system would be a cool concept, there would need to be balances across the board to accommodate for these additions. And while I would want to see this kind of system in some form make its way into the game, I'm not sure if it's worth the overall disruption and such large changes it would bring. Maybe I'm overestimating a bit, and these changes would hardly cause any issues. Without testing, we're only left guessing. So, what do you think? Does any of this sound like a good idea? Would either of my proposals fit into Dead by Daylight? Would you find the role of survivor overall more exciting if there was some role or unique passive for the survivors? Let's discuss it down below. I'm sure some of you have had these thoughts about this exact same thing before. Perhaps there's some great ideas that I've missed, so let's hear it. And that'll be everything. So thank you all for watching. I'm Duster Rue, and I will see you all real soon. Bye-bye!